that would be important.
And I noticed like in Google, when you do a Google search, there's certain things that it'll show you at first, and it's kind of like common, and then like you want to go like beyond that, you have to keep going page after page after page until you actually find like the dissenting view.
Right, so there is something that we want to know according to what rules do they program the other one, because it's rules of discourse, but they're automated. עוד 3 דקות, אז כאילו להגיד לך מתי
את תתחילי בעצם, נכון? תגידי, welcome to the...
כן,
בסדר? מה שכן, can I ask people to sit more here so I can see all of you? It's just easier, if that's okay? Thanks very much. Sorry?
No, it's not you, it's them.
Yeah, I just want more people to be, because we're less today, so we can actually see, so I can be in good eye contact with all of you.
Are you streaming again?
I'm streaming, but I'm not recording you guys and ladies, just her. Her face is going to appear, and it's just so people can hear our discussion, okay? Also for some of the students who can be here today and went already home, which is good, right? End of the semester, really exciting. So I've just asked not to, if possible, not to sit here, but rather more
I
here.
just have to leave early, so I don't want to like disrupt.
That's fine. So you can sit. You can be the first one here, right before the two guys here. But the 3 of you would be good if you. Thanks so much. אנחנו צריכות לפתוח את המקרן.
כן, בטוח.
רק שמתי אותו על פלן. ואנחנו יכולות מבחינתי. עוד 2 דקות. So we have 2 minutes. If any of you have any questions, before we're going to wait for 2:15 to actually begin on time, but if you do have questions after last week.
For our professor.
Oh, go ahead, please.
Regarding the final paper, if we do it in pair, how do we submit it? Does each one of us submit it, or?
Only one, that's enough. You just have to write on it the other person's name.
Right on where? In the title of the
Yeah.
title?
And the title of the paper on the top page.
So it's really small letters at the end of the paper in the corner.
You can add a front page that doesn't count in the counting of the 3, on which you can write, the title and your names and everything.
You're shaking your point. I don't know what this is. You don't know what all this is? They said it's treasure. No, it's fine. Yeah.
Okay, אז נתחיל.
Please. And try to sit more in the, so I can see everyone easily. Can I ask you please to move to the center? Is that okay? Yeah, everyone at the beginning so I can see you better. It's quite hard.
It's like a straight line.
Can you please move more inside? So
Can we start?
it's fine.
Okay, so I'm starting. Yeah. Okay, so welcome to the last session of the digital discourse course in the BA in Liberal Arts at Tel Aviv University. I'm Carmel Vaisman, for those who are joining us via streaming. And today again, Shani Evenstein Sigalov is with us to continue. Last time we talked about Wikipedia, and this time we're going to talk about everything beyond Wikipedia. We're going to talk a bit about Wikimedia Foundation. And mostly about Wikidata, which I thought would be the best goodbye ending of this course, just for you to take a peek into the future of this course. So let's start.
Yes, so hello everyone. It's great to see you again and very exciting to be here for the last session of your course. I heard from Carmel about your syllabus and I think it's super, I thought it's super interesting. So I'm happy to be part of this course and be able to hopefully have a bit of a discussion today about the Wikimedia Movement and Wikidata. I'm hoping that what I'm going to showcase today is going to be new to you guys and ladies. And yeah, so I'll start by asking, last time we talked mostly about Wikipedia, and I'm curious if everything was okay, if you got it, if you have any questions before I delve into and continue what we started last week. No questions. Everything was clear. Awesome. So I'm just going to delve into the second part of the presentation that we didn't get to last time, and this is going to be about the Wikimedia movement. I'm flashing here everything that we've talked about last time. We're going to get to it soon. And here it is. So I want to open this session by introducing to you the Wikimedia movement. So we've talked about Wikipedia. All of you know it well, quite well, hopefully after last time better than you did before. And what I think many, again, don't know is that Wikipedia actually has many sister projects. Here you see some of them. And yeah, and this is a list of them. So you can see WikiCommons, which is our, it's almost a reservoir, a database for media files. So most of the pictures that you see in Wikipedia actually are uploaded to WikiCommons, and every picture or video, or it could be an audio file, has its own page with some metadata, some information about that picture or that video, and then we can connect it to Wikipedia articles. It's also a standalone database, right? And it has millions of free licensed items on it. You can see Wikisource and Wikibooks. Can I have people here guess what's the difference between Wikisource and what's Wikibooks? Does anyone know Wikisource? Have you heard of it? No. So for Wikisource, we would upload anything that is already public domain, like texts, like Shakespeare, like the Bible, and anything, any literary piece that you can think of can be uploaded to Wikisource. And it's a platform that allows us to actually annotate the text, etc., etc. So it's really nice. So now that you know what Wikisource is, what do you think Wikibooks is? What?
Maybe like it sounds really like similar. Like I thought that you were describing Wikibooks, honestly.
Right, I know, it's very confusing. So Wikibooks would be for textbooks, for let's say that you study medicine. So in some places in the world, just acquiring the actual physical books that you would need to study is hundreds and hundreds of dollars, or the equivalent, right, in the specific currency. But textbooks actually cost a lot of money. So humanity has been looking for other ways to create open books. And this is a platform that allows us to do exactly that. It allows us to curate textbooks for specific subjects. It could be anything that you think, math, physics, literature, whatever. And basically have the crowd, usually with a teacher or some kind of instructor, creating a textbook for specific things, either because it's expensive or simply because we don't have an actual textbook for a specific subjects, right? It could be that a subject is so new that there is no good textbook, and then a course would then curate the information in Wikibooks in order to help others in the world learn that subject. So this is what we have Wikibooks for. We have, I think the rest of them are quite easy to understand, right? Wikispecies, it's quite clear, it's about species. Wiktionary is basically a dictionary online. We think that this is going to disappear because of Wikidata. Hopefully I'll get to it a bit later on. But for now we have Wiktionary, Wikiquote, which some of you may know, right? When you look for a quote of someone important, you might find it under Wikiquote. Wikivoyage, which is almost similar to TripAdvisor, just openly curated again on Wiki. And the last one, which we're going to get to later on today, is Wikidata. So these are some of the sister projects. And basically, when I say the Wikimedia movement or ecosystem, I'm talking about three different things, that they're all connected. They're all part of a specific movement, right? But all of them are different. So on top, you see the projects like Wikipedia, Wikidata, Wikicommons, all the ones that we've just now mentioned. And at the bottom here, you see the Wikimedia Foundation. Carmel actually mentioned it. This is the non-profit organization that stands behind Wikipedia, that raises the money, that keeps the servers for Wikipedia open. The non-profit sits in San Francisco, and this is actually, and I'm on the board of the Wikimedia Movement. Again, we mentioned it, but now that you get a better understanding of what that means. Now, the Wikimedia Foundation doesn't run or doesn't control the actual projects. Who controls the projects? People, volunteers, you, me, the people who actually contribute to Wikipedia are the ones who manage really Wikipedia, not the Wikimedia Foundation. But there are certain relationships, right, between the communities and the foundation. And there's also relationships between the Wikimedia Foundations and the last part of this triangle, which is local chapters or thematic groups. So for instance, what are local chapters or thematic groups? A local chapter could be Wikimedia Israel, right? We have a nonprofit here in Israel that is in relationships with the Wikimedia Foundation. It's an affiliate, an official affiliate of the Wikimedia Foundation, and it supports the work that is being done in all of the projects here, in various levels, right? We usually need a formal entity, for instance, to collaborate with other organizations. So Wikimedia Israel would be the one, that entity that collaborates, let's say, between the Hebrew Wikipedia and the Israel Museum or the National Library, okay? Do you get the idea? So that's just a non-profit local entity that supports the projects. Usually, it's focused on a specific language, it's focused on a geographical area, local chapters or user groups, and there are also thematic groups. So for instance, before I joined the board of the Wikimedia Foundation, I was the chair of two such thematic groups. One was the Wikipedia and Education user group, and the other one was Wikimedia Medicine. And I'm going to touch upon it a bit later on. So this is, again, this is our ecosystem. This is really how the movement looks like. It's a group of different entities and different projects that all talk to each other, all connect, but not necessarily manage or run each other, okay? So the foundation doesn't run the local chapters, but it has some kind of relationships with it. And again, the local chapters or thematic groups do not control the projects, but they have relationships with them. I hope that's clear. And I would just say that this is all of this huge thing that is across the world, right? It's happening all over the world. We have about 40 chapters, but about 150 affiliates, right? Thematic groups or user groups, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a lot of different groups in different places in the world. Some of them work internationally, like Wikimedia Medicine and Wikimedia and Education work across the globe. They have members from countries, from different countries, but local chapters and user groups are usually specific to a specific geographical location. All of this huge thing together is a Wikimedia movement, but it's also a part of a bigger movement that we usually refer to as the open knowledge movement, right? Do you know any other organizations that might be participating in the open knowledge movement? Nothing? Can you think of anything that you might have seen online that might relate to the open knowledge movement? And this will mean anything to do with open access, open culture, open data, open science, right? All the opens. And the idea is really to make knowledge in all its forms, in all its varieties accessible to the public. Yeah.
I mean, can't like social media be considered something like that though?
Well, if the platform itself is, let's say, open source and it's curated by the masses, unlike, let's say, Facebook, right? Facebook is a corporate company, it's for profit, it has its own agenda that the public doesn't control. The public can choose whether or not to participate or not.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, we don't control, right, the actual platforms. And the idea of that platform is not to make knowledge accessible, right? So when we talk about, I'll give you some names, and if you're curious, you can try to find out more. But we have something called, first of all, there's Creative Commons, right? I've mentioned Creative Commons in the previous lesson when we talk about licenses and open licenses. So that would be an organization separate from the Wikimedia movement, but still collaborating and working in that sphere of the open knowledge movement. There's the Open Knowledge Foundation. It's a separate entity. There are specific groups that do Open GLAM, which we'll get to in a second. And there are specific groups that do open data, specifically in the scientific world, right? Making sure that data is accessible to the public, et cetera, et cetera. So we are part of a bigger, and everyone who's doing open source, right? Any open source platform would be considered part of this bigger ecosystem. So basically what I wanted to convey to you is that Wikimedia, while a strong and important player, is just one of a bigger thing that's happening in the world in the past, I would say, couple, or I would say 3 decades, right? Maybe even more. If you count open source, it started, the ideas for open source started in the 60s, 70s. So it was actually influenced by the computer sciences. When they started to think about copyleft, which I don't have time to go into, there are copyrights, and they invented copyleft. And the whole idea of an open source platform that you can actually reveal the code to other people, and people can contribute to the actual source, to the actual code that creates any application, right? So all of that is part of a bigger thing that's happening in the world, where we want knowledge to be more accessible to everyone and more transparent. So Wikimedia is one player in that realm, an important one, a big one, but not the only one, right? With that in mind, let's see a few of the things that we want to achieve and what we are actually doing. So I'll just mention that we are in the process, the whole Wikimedia movement is now in the process of creating a strategy for 2030. It's important because it's going to affect everything we do, right? It's going to inform how we do things, what our priorities are, and where we put our energy and money towards. And if you remember from the previous lesson, we get money from whom? Mostly from the public, right, that donate. So we feel very much obliged, and we have a responsibility to spend that money wisely. And we're talking about millions and millions of dollars per year, right? So we're doing a strategy. We have 2 things that already guide us, which is we want knowledge to be as part of a service, and we want knowledge equity. We want knowledge to be available to everyone, regardless of where they are, if they're online or not, if they are, it doesn't matter what race, language, et cetera, So this is what guides us. If you're interested to learn more, you can go online and just click strategy, or you can click on here in my presentation, which I'm going to share with the 2 links to the, to the YouTube videos of the streaming through Carmel. So this is what we're doing, and I just wanted to take a few minutes to tell you a bit about some of the projects that we engage in, because I think it was important for me to not go through 2 sessions with you without telling you a bit about the vastness of what we do, because all you know is Wikipedia, but what you don't know is that we are doing so many other things. So I wanted to try to describe a bit what we do. So I like to kind of divide what we do into 2 different kinds of projects. And I would say that one is working in the developing world. I've actually mentioned it in our previous session, but I'm going to give you some more examples. And the second is establishing work with institutions that are already very much working and curating knowledge themselves. So I'm going to talk a bit about both of them. So when I say outreach in the developing world or emerging communities, I'm talking about, for instance, strengthening smaller wikis in languages that might be on the verge of extinction. I'm talking about preserving knowledge, cultural knowledge, that is very hard to get to. Think about, in general, we're talking a lot about how we preserve knowledge, and I've told you last week that Wikipedia is mainly written by males and in general by the Western world. Now that's a problem, right? Because what do we do when we have cultures that don't have a written? I've also talked about some of our, if you remember, some of the guiding rules that we have, right? I call them the 5 pillars of writing in Wikipedia, and one of them was verifiability, right? And the fact that when we write something, if we do a good work, we will bring a reference to where we took that information from. And so what do we do with cultures that don't have a written culture, right? They have, let's say, an oral culture. And the information, the cultural information goes from generation to generation. How do we curate that? And how do we verify that? So these are questions that our community, that our global community have to deal with. And this is parts of how we try to make that happen. And one of the things that are worrying us a lot is that almost half the world is still not online, right? Hopefully it's going to change in the coming few years, but at this moment, as we speak here, and we're so used to having internet access, right? Half the world is still not connected. That means that they don't have the privilege of access to information, which we take almost for granted, right? So some of our projects, and you can, I'm going to show you Internet in a Box. You can pass it through the class. Internet in a Box, this tiny little box, basically holds all of Wikipedia's medical information. This is part of Wikimedia Medicine, of what we do in Wikimedia Medicine, and what we do is curate all of the medical information that we have, including pictures and videos, and we curate some more information from external partners that we have, and we send it to places in the world that don't have access to the internet, that have wars, that have floods, that have basically a problem accessing information online. And this tiny box becomes a hotspot for about 30 people and allows you to basically tap into that knowledge wherever you are in the world, right? And the better technology becomes, the smaller the device gets, the smaller it gets, but the more information we can curate on it. So now this one has 128 gigas of information, which means basically I can put all of English Wikipedia on it, which just got this week to 6 million articles. Yay. So a milestone, right, for the world. So this is just a small example of the things that we do, and we're trying to make knowledge accessible everywhere in the world. This is one type of collaborations of projects that we run. And you can just imagine, yeah, there's a link here to Wikipedia Zero, which is a beautiful project that doesn't exist anymore. But you can watch the videos, it's 5 minutes, and it will give you a better understanding of the impact that we have when we get to such a place in Africa where there is no school, there are no textbooks, and giving them access to Wikipedia, because you remember all of them have cell phones. Even very poor places do have cell phones, so most of the discussion becomes, do I have enough money to surf, to buy data, basically, right? And most of them don't. And the children here describe how they basically need to take their lunch money in order to pay for data, right? And this project, what they did is collect many, many signatures, and they, in collaboration with the Wikimedia Foundation, applied and appealed basically to Orange, to mobile companies, to cell companies, to allow them to surf the web, to access Wikipedia with zero cost, and they succeeded. So these are types of collaborations that we do around the world too. You can imagine how that would change the lives of people, right, with no access. So I'm going to run very quickly about the rest of it. I'll just say that you know that we already want quantity of people, right? We know that the more eyes that go through a text, it will become more, what? More accurate, more reliable, more balanced. And so that's great, but we also want quality, right? And for that, we collaborate with institutions, big institutions, that curate knowledge. And I want to talk very, very briefly, I'll do it really briefly, about GLAM and about education. And the rest of it, if you're interested in it, you can just contact me later on and I'll give you some more information. So GLAM, what's GLAM? You've heard me say that a few times since the beginning of the session. So besides a really good opportunity to show a David Bowie picture in my presentation, GLAM is acronym for Galleries, Libraries, Archives, and Museums. So basically an umbrella term for all sorts of collaborations that we have. Today it's much more than just galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. It's any institution basically that curated information and wants to collaborate with us. So just to give you a view of what it is, and also to see if you're still focused at 2 p.m., do you recognize the three pictures above? These are just a tiny bit of the institutions that we collaborate with. So who recognizes this?
The Library of Congress.
No. Nice, but no. We collaborate with them as well. Anyone recognizes? That's the British Museum, and that's the first GLAM institution that collaborated with us. We had a Wikimedian in residence who stayed for 6 months at the museum and helped to make accessible the knowledge that is curated at the museum through Wikimedia projects. And that entails all sorts of things that I don't have time to get into, but that's the idea. This one I'm sure you'll recognize.
The Met.
The Met, yes, and I'll touch on it a bit later on because we do amazing things with the Met. And that one, you recognize it? Anyone?
Is it in France?
Yes.
That's all I know.
That's all you know. That's good enough for me. At this point, this is Versailles, maybe the most well-known palace that we have in France. One of the best well-known, the most well-known. And yeah, the rest of them, it's just I just wanted it to have a sense, to get a sense of the types of museums that we collaborate with. This is happening again all over the world, in Israel as well. Libraries, the Library of Congress that you mentioned is also here, of course, many others, and archives, and also other things, like I said. So for instance, this is one of the coolest. Welcome to a city or a place in the world that I know. This is the sign for Monmouth. Monmouth is a small, tiny village in Wales, which I think if you haven't been to Wales, anyone should at least once in their lives come to Wales. It's a beautiful place. And I actually went, I presented this project for years, but then I suddenly had a chance to get to Wales myself. And I went to Monmouth and checked it out, and what they did, this is the first Wikipedian city in the world. What they did is they have Wi-Fi all over the city, all over this village rather, not a city, but more of a village, and a town, right? And they basically, it's Wales, so they have so many historic buildings. So what they did is all the people who live in Monmouth many of them came together and wrote articles about the historic buildings in the city, and then they created, QR codes? Have you had a chance to? So there's something called Pedia. So what they did is they created articles in all sorts of languages, not just English. And when you go and then they put plaques on the different houses in the city. So when you go to that town, you can actually scan the QR, and it recognizes the language in your phone, and it will show you the article in your own language about the places that you see. So this is an example of something completely different than a GLAM institution, but so cool. And really, I came 3 years after that project was launched, and I still was able to see the plaques and scan it, and it worked. So that was awesome. Another thing that I think you might have seen is this logo for Wiki Loves Monuments. This has become the biggest photography contest in the world. And when I say the biggest, I actually mean a Guinness record, right? It's in the book of Guinness. Is that the name? The book of the Guinness Book of
World Records.
That exactly. So you all got them. So Wiki Loves Monuments now hosts almost 40 countries around the world. The idea is very simple. Go out, take a picture of your local monuments in order to help preserve them, and then maybe write articles about them, do more things, but basically create a database of our monuments around the world. In some cases, like in Israel, we don't even have a list of monuments. So the work that we had to do here locally in order to start this contest meant that we needed to collaborate with all sorts of organizations in Israel in order to, for the first time, create a list of monuments. So this is just another example of how the public can participate in preserving knowledge around us, right? Our monuments, our history, etc., etc. I want to move on. GLAM has also arrived to Israel. Yeah?
I saw a government, US government.
Yeah.
Could you explain a little about that?
I can. The federal US government basically releases all of its documents under CC0. That means there's tons of information available to the public. And what we do in that collaboration is to make sure that this information is available through Wikimedia projects. As you remember, it's the 5th biggest website in the world. So when people search for something, they usually get first to Wikipedia. So if they find what they're looking for there, they can then get to other sites. But they will first check Wikipedia. So if it's there, it's more likely that people can have access to it. Okay. So this was GLAM, and yes, it was in Israel. I was actually the one who started GLAM here in Israel, so I was in the position to create all these collaborations and many more. This is GLAM Wiki conference that we curated here in Israel in 2018. GLAMers from all around the world came to Tel Aviv, and we discussed how we can work better with cultural institutions around the world. And I want to mention education. I think what you're doing now here is just the beginning, right? In Carmel's course, we're talking about all of this open knowledge movement, and specifically about the Wikimedia movement in the context of Discourse. But what we actually do is we collaborate more in a deeper way with institutional organizations. It could be either from K to 12, right? So until high school, or it could be in an academic or a college, so higher education. Either way, there are some lecturers that give their students assignments to create knowledge in Wikimedia projects. Many times it's in Wikipedia, but we also have collaborations creating wikibooks, creating Wiktionary items, creating, taking pictures if it's small kids. We have a beautiful collaboration with just in Be'er Sheva, where the kids go to local monuments, take a picture, and then write the article in Hebrew. So they learn all sorts of skills through collaborating in our platforms. So it touches on digital skills, digital literacy, critical thinking. There's a list of why it matters. We actually have today a collaboration with the Ministry of Education, so we can teach the teachers how to use Wikipedia as a learning and teaching platform. And I'll skip that, and I'll say that in academia, we basically collaborate all over the world, in Israel as well. And what you see here, this is my Wikimed course, which Carmel mentioned last session. In 2013, there was another milestone that happened, and I was able to convince the university not only to give an assignment in Wikipedia, but to actually create a whole course that gives students academic credit for learning how to contribute to Wikipedia. My students basically wrote until now about 10% of all the medical information in Hebrew Wikipedia. So not too shabby, considering a small, elective course that they can take throughout their school, their studies. And yeah, and this is there's a group of us educators around the world connected. I've mentioned that I was the chair of the Wikipedia and Education group, and we continue to work around the world. There's also a specific focus on closing specific gaps that we have in Wikipedia. The gender gap is one of them, and I was actually very happy to see the Women in Red is one of these projects that we have to make. What are red links in Wikipedia? You all know that. What are red links?
Not available.
Well, not available, non-existent, right? So if you see a red link, it means this is notable enough, but nobody wrote the article yet. So Women in Red curates a list of notable women in history that need an article but still don't have one. And actually the 6 million article in English Wikipedia that was just written a few days ago was from this list. So it was about the notable women in history. Yes, and I'll just say that, כן, אני עושה את זה, אני בדיוק בסוף. I'll just say that collaborating through GLAM and education is one of our biggest ways to create more balance and bring communities that are not participating usually in the project. So that's a good thing. And with that, I want to move to Wikidata. So questions so far while I'll switch the presentations? Awesome. So Wikidata. You already know me. So I'm going to skip that. And what I'm going to focus on is I want you to finish this lecture knowing what Wikidata is and why it's important. If we do that, I'm happy. This presentation has one more part that we're not going to get to, but if you're interested, it's going to be available to you and you can skim through it later on. So the first part is basically some background and first steps. So let's delve into it. Okay, so switching gears for a minute and changing the focus. It's very hard these days to walk around, especially as digital citizens, and not hear the words big data, right? And not hear about AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. These are kind of buzzwords that basically everyone who's a bit alert to what's happening in the world hears. But I want to mention that it's all part of a bigger scientific discipline called data science. Data science wasn't created recently, but but recently became much more important maybe than before. Well, that's not true. It was always important, but more people became more aware of it and started to put more energy into it in recent years. And why is this relevant to us? Because this big data and artificial intelligence and machine learning, this would not be possible without data, raw data. And this is why Wikidata is playing such an important part in this ecosystem. But let's first understand what's Wikidata. So what's Wikidata anyway? So Wikidata is basically a database, not just a regular database, but database for data. It's a knowledge base. It is multilingual. It is bred by both humans and machines, which is why it matters so much, right? Not only people can read it, but machines can make sense of it. We'll see how. And basically it holds information that we call structured linked data. So far, so good? Okay. Oh, and it's under a free license. And the specific license for Wikidata is CC0. If you remember what it is there are no, it's not that there are no, okay, I'll differentiate between the license and what it means. But in this case, all you need to understand is that data, facts, they don't have copyrights, right? Data, raw data, facts, there are no copyrights on facts, okay? The copyright comes when we interpret or when we express information in a specific way. So copyrights begin when we manifest in some way different types of data. Okay, does that make sense to you? Okay, but the actual facts, no copyrights. It was launched at this is Wikipedia's youngest sister project. It was launched in 2012, the end of 2012, the beginning of 2013. It's part of the Wikimedia ecosystem, as you already know. I've mentioned that. But I want to talk about why it was created, why we needed to create a multilingual database for structured linked data that is both read by humans and machines. Why did the need come for that? So in order to talk about that, I'm curious if you know this guy here. How many of you know this guy? Anyone here recognize him without using an app? Okay, so maybe this is going to help you. I love this picture. So this is Tim Berners-Lee here on the left, a man that we all owe a lot to. This guy created the World Wide Web. Is it the internet? So that's the reason why I like this picture. He didn't create the internet, so we need to differentiate between the internet, which is almost a platform, right, and the web, the World Wide Web, the www that all of us know. It's one app on top of the internet. Okay, so Tim Berners-Lee he's the one who invented the web, and hyperlinks, and we all owe him a lot. He's a visionary, and when he started to talk about the web, it was already in 94, where he talks for the first time about the idea of a semantic web. So you all know that the web went through a series of, I would say, jumps or evolutions. We have the first version of the web, what's called Web 1.0. In that version, what did we have? We only had big companies presenting a website that we as users could read. That was it, right? In the second version of the web, called Web 2, what happened? We mentioned it last week.
Clicks, interaction.
Right. We suddenly have websites that allow interaction. So users do not only read or consume information that is being brought to them, but also participate in creating that information. Basically, this is the web as you all know it. Most of the websites that you are using today are Web 2 platforms, right? What are some of them besides Wikipedia? What do you use these days? Come on, you're in a discourse course. You've mentioned for sure a few of them. So Facebook, YouTube, any blog, any, right? There's almost no website today that doesn't allow some kind of interactions with users. So that's the second version of the web. But we actually live already in a world of Web 3, and there are different names to it. Sometimes it will be referred to as Web 3, sometimes it will be referred to as the semantic web, sometimes they will just call it linked data. But the idea is, if I need to explain to you what this means, just imagine that on top of the Web 2, as you know it, there is another layer of data. And we can actually access this data and make sense of it and use it to our own needs. And this is important. Why? I'm going to talk about that through something that you all know quite well, which is Wikipedia. So if you think about Wikipedia, you'll know that there are specific data that we put in again and again and again, repeatedly, in different languages. We actually have about 300 languages, so think of 300 different volunteers that need to go to update a specific thing that happened. Let's say that a writer passed away, right? So we now need to update the date of his passing, and we need to do it 300 times. So that was one challenge, the fact that there are specific types of data gets dated, right? It gets updated, and right now we need to do repetitive work to do it. Well, not right now, but before Wikidata. Second, have you learned about categories in Wikipedia? Have you encountered categories? So usually when you read an article on Wikipedia, if you scroll all the way down, you'll see that the article is connected to a specific category. Categories are basically awesome ways to kind of tag articles that belong to the same group. And we can create whatever group. It's like tags, right? So we can tag, or we can put an article in a specific category, and then it helps us to see what else is in that category. For instance, if I'm interested in women writers in France, I can go to French women writers category and see who's there, right? And for that, categories are awesome. It's really a powerful tool, and it's great. But the moment I would like to add, let's say I want to add anything else to that category, to that question that I had, and let's say that I want not only the French women writers, but I want the French women writers who were born in Lyon between 1456 to, I don't know, 1705. Let's say this is what I want, because that's what my research does, and this is what's interesting to me. In that case, categories can help me. I would basically need to go one by one in the category. It could be many, right? It could be a huge category of many, many, many articles. And the annoying thing, the data is somewhere there, floating in Wikipedia, but I can't access it, although it's there, but I can't access it. I can't get a specific answer to my question of who are the ladies, writers, who were born in Lyon between these 2 years that I mentioned before. So that's a second challenge that we have. A third challenge has to do with GLAMs and with basically, I would say, cultural institutions, cultural and knowledge institutions in general. But basically, there has been a desire for humanity for many, many, many years now to have a central hub, to have a central place or database or a website where we can find all of the art, let's say, or all of the details, all of the libraries, right? Now, humanity wasn't able to fulfill this dream. Why? Why do you think? Why was it so difficult? Any idea? Yeah?
Copyright. Like,
Interesting. Copyrights is definitely one issue, but not the major thing. What else could it be if not copyrights? It's a simple and technical thing, right? Yeah?
Used to be make an art piece, there's only one copy of it, you can't copy it over to 1,000 more pictures, prints. It's just the one physical object. You can't have everything in one place because, well, where would that place be?
We're talking about the digital representation of a physical item. So first of all, we're talking about digital versions of the items, okay? Or basically, we're talking about the metadata about the physical items.
Well,
Okay.
the server would have to be gargantuan. There will be hundreds of millions of people going into it every single day, trying to access the data there, and the servers will not be able to code.
So you're saying there's a technical, so you're saying there might be a technical limitations that prevent us from doing it. You're right, but but technicalities are usually fixable. This technicality that I'm talking about is not. And the problem is that there is no standard for metadata. So every single museum or library or archive or whatever governmental institution you think of, when they create their own catalog of what they have, right, the digital records of the items that they have, everyone is doing it in their own standard. They have their own way of describing the information in their own database. That means that when we try to converge all these different databases, they don't speak the same language. So not having a global standard for metadata is what basically prevented humanity from doing it, not the technical issues or the copyright issues, which are valid issues, but still something that ideally we would have been able to overcome if we mark specific items as replicas or if we mark specific items are still copyrighted, right? But the idea of having that central hub was just impossible because we weren't able to fix the metadata problem. The fact that each institution is doing it in their own way. Keep that in mind. We'll get to how Wikidata is basically fixing it, okay, for the first time. So this was the need. And actually the question that made people start working on designing Wikidata was, give me a list of the 10 cities in the world according to how big the city is, so rank it ascendingly according to the size of the city that has a female mayor. Today, if you look, you'll get the websites that show you the answer to that, but basically think of a Google search for that. How would that look like? You'll basically get tens of thousands results of websites that mention these words, but don't really give you an actual answer to your question. Do you see what I'm saying? Okay, and we, as you remember, we want to get accurate answers to our questions. So this is what brought on Wikidata. And I actually want to show you how it looks like, because as of now, I was just describing it. So this is www.wikidata.org. And here, what you see is the item for Douglas Adams. How many of you know Douglas Adams or have read anything by Douglas Adams? The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Someone? Anyone? Oh, there's one. Bless you. So you might actually know why the number that Douglas Adams got was 42, which is, by the way, the answer to life, the universe, and everything, mind you. You need to read the books to understand that. But this is an eternal joke, and that's fine. But let's see how it's actually built. So this is the item in Wikidata about the writer Douglas Adams. And when it opens up, this is what we see. We see this table, sort of a table, and it shows me the different depictions of this name, Douglas Adams, in different languages. There are more, much more than 4. Here it shows me only these 4 because it was using my IP here in Israel, and these are, the system knows that these are the spoken languages, the most spoken languages in Israel, so they showed me English, Hebrew, Arabic, and Russian, okay? I can actually adjust the list of languages that I see. But the idea is very simple. This Q42, this is the reason why machines can also understand this item. Every item in the system will get a Q number with its own that is unique to it, right? Nothing else is Q42, just Douglas Adams. Now, in human languages, I am able to depict Douglas Adams in different letters. It could be English letters, it could be Hebrew letters, Arabic letters, Cyrillic letters, but all of them are talking about the same entity. So now, these labels are allowing me to describe this same item in different languages, but it's still the same item, it's Q42. Is that understandable? Is that clear? I can also add a small description and say who this person is. Why is it important, do you think? Why do you think it's important that we add a description? Yeah?
Because there is a lot of Douglas Adams.
Yes, it's common sense, right? We might have more than one Douglas Adams. And especially when you go back to history, fathers and sons usually had the same name, going and going and going. So you can have 3 painters with the same name, and you don't know which is which. Or you can have names that are really common, that are researchers, and you need to somehow differentiate between them. So this is why we have descriptions. We also have also known as, right, or aliases, because sometimes a writer can have a pen name or people can identify in different ways, but it's again the same entity. So the item would open with that, with a description of who this is, the label in different languages, etc., etc. Then, and this is where semantic web gets to the picture, we have statements about that item. And in the semantic web, we always talk about triples of information. So there are 3 sacks or bags that we kind of need to fill in order to have a statement, right? So we are now talking about Douglas Adams, that's the Q number, that's the subject, right? And now we can have a property and a value to describe that. It's almost like a form. You all flew around the world, so you know that immigration form that you need to fill out when they ask you where do you come from and which port, and then you add a value. So think about the category that they give you as a property, and then what you actually put in is the value of that property. And with these, we can actually describe now the item on Douglas Adams in a structured, linked way. Let's see how that looks like. So one very important statement that we can say about Douglas Adams while describing him is that he's an instance of human. I love this one, right? It took me some time to get used to the fact that I need to put in instance of human. Sounds simple, right? But if I don't do that, if I don't mark him as human, I can get, when I query Wikidata, when I ask questions, when I ask database-specific questions, it could be mixed with a fictional character or a cat. Okay, so it's important for me to mark that this specific item is an instance of human. Otherwise, it could be many other things, right? And now I have a series of things that I can say. So what's the gender and when he was born? And what's the date where he was born, etc., etc. And the place of burial and an actual picture, etc., etc. So all this is structured, linked data. You see that it's blue. Each thing here is basically a link where you can go to the actual thing itself. And these are the triples that I mentioned. So the first one is Douglas Adams, but these two, the property and values, these create the statements about that. And together, they are a triplet of information inside the database. Does that make sense to you? Did you understand the idea of triples? Not really? So all I want you to know, we don't have to really get into that. I just want you to know that when we talk about the semantic web, we always talk about 3 parts of think of it as a sentence, right? That have a subject, an object, and a predicate. So some kind of relationships between the two. So let's say that I can say that Albert Einstein was born in right? So Albert Einstein, that's the subject, that's the item that I'm describing. The property was being born in, and the value would be the actual year where he was born. So like that, I can take specific statements to describe now Albert Einstein or Douglas Adams or whatever happens in the world, right? Every object, anything that is a thing, it doesn't have to be a physical thing. It could be an idea, a thought, a place, right? You get the idea. I can describe them now in a structured way. And because I now have it structured, I can actually query it and do cool stuff with it. So I just want to show you this, and I'm going to start showing you some cool stuff that we can do with it before. So let me just, and I'll back to you. Then after all the statements that we've seen, there's another section that's called identifiers, and this is the big thing. Remember our third challenge of having a hub of all the metadata of all the places in the world, of all the databases, right? Then this is how Wikidata basically solves that problem. It kind of bypasses it, because what it does, it creates a link. Let's say that I now do a research about Douglas Adams. Then I would be interested to know what his records say at the National Library or the Library of Congress or the National Library of Israel or IMDb. So there are all sorts of external databases, not ours, right? Not related to the Wikimedia movement, just general external databases that we will basically connect inside the item of Douglas Adams. So this is, for instance, the VF for him. VF, you all know VF? VF is important. This is the virtual identifier authority file. So this is a huge database. It is international, and it basically curates everything, like all the writers, all the entities, right? Any important person would be here in VF, and that's the actual number in VF, inside their database, to the record of Douglas Adams. So what did we do here? We created a link to the external database, okay? Do you get what we did? So it kind of becomes a hub now. If I want to learn more about Douglas Adams, I can use these links, and this one will actually take me to VF, to the record they have on Douglas Adams. So I can suddenly have all information curated in one place. Almost like in Wikipedia, you have the external links, right? It helps you to get to more information. So this is almost the same. But it basically helps you to get to the record inside external databases that exist in the world and connect all of them in one place. So you don't have to look for it yourself. You can basically come to one place and find it. Questions about that? How it's built? Awesome. I'll just say that we have, that's inaccurate. It's over 70 million items now. So this is in terms of thinking how big is it. We have over 70 million items, around 20,000 users, many institutions that donate their metadata to us, so we can have it on Wikidata, and many AI agents, like you all talk to Siri maybe and Alexa, right? Where do they take the answers to what you're asking? From Wikidata. That's one of the big sources that they're using, okay? So this is a game changer, if it wasn't clear until now. And I want to show you some examples. Sounds really interesting, but let's see some examples, so how it actually works. That will help you understand the meaningfulness of it all. So, yes. So what you're seeing now, I promised that we'll get to the Met. What you see here is a gala evening at the Met, where people, curators and all the dignified people who arrived to that gala evening, you see big screens, and they are seeing pictures of items from the Met's collection. And the Met, I didn't say that before, but I should have. The Met basically created its own open strategy, and they released hundreds of thousands of items and their metadata to the public under a CC0 license. So they basically made parts of their collections available to the public. And we have a Wikimedian in residence that is working at the Met for almost 2 years now, helping to make that accessible. Some of the work that we do is we've created a nice little game here, right? And the game is called Depicts. So you can see as a visitor at the museum, a picture, let's say, that is available in the collection of the Met, and it will ask you, do you see a vase here? Or do you see a house? And all you need to do is click. You play a game, right? You click yes or no. This is what they're doing on the screens. And when they do that, a statement is written behind the scenes on that picture, right? So on the item of the picture, we will now have a statement that it depicts a tree or it depicts a vase, okay? That means a lot. So this is one fun way to help the public participate. Again, you can be waiting for the bus or waiting in the supermarket, and you can play a simple game that will help you enrich Wikidata, right? So while you play, something is written behind the scenes in the database. It helps us describe it better. If you want to learn more about the Met and their AI project in collaboration with MIT and Microsoft and us, then you can go to the link. I'm going to skip that, but I will say that we have a very pretentious, I would say, well, not pretentious, but maybe a good
Ambitious?
Yeah, maybe a good word would be very, very ambitious project to depict all of the paintings. So the sum of all paintings inside Wikidata. We're doing a really great job, and you can actually click on these links to see paintings, creators, collections, etc., or to see it by country. We're progressing very nicely, and Wikidata is helping us curate all that information. I'm going to skip that, but all of these links will be available to you. So if you want to see more, all you need to do is click and see more examples. I want to show you this. This is important. This is a project that was done at the Oxford University at the Bobby Lane Library. We had a Wikimedia resident sitting at the library for almost 3 years and 3 years. And what they did is this, what you see now is the Astrolabe Explorer. This is a website that is available online, and all of it is basically generated by Wikidata queries. So it's automatically generated, right? And the idea was, it was a proof of concept. It was the idea that you can take a collection, any collection, in this case it was a collection of astrolabes, right, which are navigation devices from our history of the world, and one of the institutions that the Baudelaire collaborated with had this amazing collection of astrolabes, and he wanted to show how you can basically tell the story of that collection through Wikidata. So the fact that what we did is we imported all the metadata about the astrolabes into Wikidata, and then he was able to basically write a query, and I'll show you a query in a second, and show people how, and get the timeline of all the astrolabes. And if you click on the people, you will be able to see a timeline of the people who created these astrolabes, etc., etc. So you can do it with anything else, right? An astrolabe was just an example, proof of concept. You can take any collection that deals with anything you want, and you can create such a website around it that allows people to explore the information in a visual way. And that's, I think, one of the strengths of Wikidata, the fact that we can suddenly visualize information in new exciting ways that weren't possible before. Yes, I'm gonna click on that, and I want to show you what I was just talking about. So I'm gonna go to Wikidata, and I want to show you how a query looks like, okay? I showed it, I created it in advance, and I'll just say I'm not a programmer. This is very easily, you can all learn it quite easily. This language that we write queries in is called Sparkle, and it doesn't belong to Wikidata, rather it's a language that we use in semantic webs in general. And so what I asked Wikidata here is to give me a list of all the women physicists that it knows. And I'll run the query. It takes a few minutes, a few seconds. Hopefully it will not time out.
Don't you think the language like kind of maybe excludes people from?
Well, that's the beauty. I mean, I do it now in English, but Wikidata is multilingual.
No, but the way that you typed it, the way that you,
What do you mean?
like the language up there, like if you
The
don't.
programming language.
The programming language?
Yeah.
Well,
Or that's not what everybody sees.
Well, no, everybody will see the results, which I'll show in a second. And what I was trying to say is that it's not that complicated. You don't have to be a programmer in order to actually know Sparkle. You can learn it quite easily. And there are all sorts of apps today that kind of try to bypass it and give you, so you can be able to speak in human natural language and tell Wikidata what you want, and it will create the query for you. Okay, so we're working on making it easier. But for now, the best way, the one that allows you the best grip, the best control over your queries is to know how to use Sparkle. And so I wanted you to know that this exists. Even if you're not going to use it, you're going to use apps that are built up on top of Wikidata. So this is how a query looks like. And Wikidata found 1,573 women physicists. Now, this is very cool, but hey, I mean, it's cool because, again, I get a table with specific answers to my very specific question. I don't get a list of websites that might or might not talk about women scientists. You understand the difference between that and Google? Is that clear? Okay. So it's nice, but it's still a table, so quite boring. So in a click of a button, basically, I can transform it to an image grid, which is much nicer, right? That's a better way to explore information. And again, I can switch the display to show it to me on a timeline. It will take it a second, but it will do it. And a timeline is, again, a much nicer way to explore information. And while it's loading, here it is. So while it's loading, I can tell you that, when I was just in high school, right, the internet was just starting out. We didn't have Wikipedia. And I remember sitting down in libraries for hours and hours and hours and days and creating for myself these timelines to help me understand musicians, because I cared about music, and who came before whom, what were the different periods, or it could be architects or painters, or it could be anything, right? So now we can do it in a click of a button thanks to Wikidata. And if that's not enough, let's say that I want to to see it on a map, to see where these people came from, I can again switch the display, and here you go. So this simple query allowed me to visualize information, which is crucial, because now that I can suddenly see it, not in a table, not on a timeline, but actually on a map, it also allows me to ask new questions or kind of interact with information in ways that weren't possible if I didn't see it on a map. Because what do you instantly see? Tell me what you see in this map with all these red dots. Yeah.
In Europe, there are many, many, many.
Right. We see a big hub in Europe and in the US, or rather North America. We see less here. Does that mean there was no women physicist in Kazakhstan? Probably not. It just means that it's not updated in Wikidata. So what happened here? I want us to pause and to really understand that this process changes the way we as humans interact with knowledge. It allows us to suddenly talk about not only what's here, but also what's missing here. So the question of our generation is more and more, how do we interact with data? How do we make sense of it? How do we interpret the results of a query that we did? These are skills that our generation need now, that we talk all the time about big data, apropos discourse, right? And apropos having a lot of information online. How do we first make sense of it? How do we get the answers that we need? And how do we question what we get? And what do we do in order to fill out the missing gaps? So visualizing information is a game changer because it really helps us to interact in different ways that weren't possible before. So I hope you think this is cool, like I think. Do you think it's cool? Quite, right? Yeah.
Is every result, does it have a Wikipedia article, or is it just like a piece of data that is?
Awesome question. So the notability threshold for Wikidata is much, much lower on Wikidata than, for instance, English Wikipedia. Okay, I'll talk about English Wikipedia for a second because it's the biggest, right? 6 million articles. So something can not exist on Wikipedia, but still be on Wikidata, okay? So we have many, many, many more. Remember that we have over 72 million items on Wikidata, but only 6 million articles on English Wikipedia. That alone tells you that there are many more items on Wikidata that don't exist in Wikipedia, and that's fine, right? There are some things that are simply not notable enough for Wikipedia, but might be for Wikidata. By the way, when you scroll down the items page, let's say we took Douglas Adams before, if you scroll all the way down after the statements and after the identifiers that connect us to external databases, you'll see a list of whether or not this item is connected to anything in the Wikiverse. So whether it has a Wikipedia article, whether it has maybe Wikiquote, Douglas Adams have both of them, maybe it has something in Commons or in Wikibooks. If it has something, it will be depicted inside the item, okay? So there will be links. Okay, so this is, in a nutshell, the power of Wikidata. I'm gonna go back to my presentation and I wanna show you some cool stuff. Oh, I have to show you this. So this is a really cool project. How much time do we have left? Let's see. Oh, good, good.
15 minutes.
Yeah, good. So this is a very cool project. I'm gonna actually click on it because I want you to see it live. It's so cool. This is again based entirely on a Wikidata, a Wikidata query, and it depicts witches in history, the witch hunts of the 16th and 17th century, and you can see everything here in Wales, in the UK, and you can basically click on them. It's interactive, and it's all based on Wikidata. They basically, the University of Edinburgh is responsible for this cool thing, and it was a project done by students, right? So what happened? They had an enormous database that existed at the university that wasn't online because no one had the money to sustain it, and it was just sitting there with no one being able to access it. So what they did, and they have a Wikimedian in residence sitting at the University of Edinburgh helping the staff and students do cool stuff. And in one of the courses there, they had a project. And what they decided to do in that project is take that database and import it to Wikidata. And then once it was on Wikidata, they were able to start doing all these cool things around it. And you can see that this website, again, based on a query that is written, that is quite simple. If you scroll down, wait, oop, it's stuck for some reason, but basically you can control it. You can see historic maps. You can see only the females, only the male, witch hunt, witches, maybe some that where the gender is unknown, et cetera, et cetera. But again, a cool new way to interact with a database that otherwise would be quite boring, well, maybe not boring for very few people, but this makes it so much cooler, so much more engaging to new generations that might be interested in the witch hunts of our history. So yeah, a game changer again in the way that we interact with knowledge, in the way we can access it and question it and see it. I'm going back to my presentation. And yeah, I just wanted to show that it could be anything at all. It could be hospitals in the world. It could be, this is a bubble chart of diseases and their symptoms. And again, if you click on it, which I'm not going to do now, it's a live bubble chart. It's moving, right? And you can basically see the relationships, the connections between the diseases and the symptoms in a live and fun and more interactive way than before. We have genes depicted on Wikidata, which helps curate information about genes. And I want to mention for the end of our session a few cool things that I want you to know. So this is another example of the impact of Wikidata and what it can help do in the world. I don't know if any of you heard of it, but in 2018, I think it was September, the National Museum in Brazil was burnt to the ground. Millions of items that weren't, of course, they didn't have a digital library of all of their collection, so millions of items lost for good. Almost impossible to get that back, right? But what a few Wikipedians/Wikidatans that live in Brazil from our community did is they used Wikidata to do something that we call data archaeology, right? They started to recreate the different rooms in the museum. Here they're trying to recreate the Afro-Brazilian room, and with the help of other people from the public, they crowdsourced it. They've asked the public to send them pictures that they took while they were visiting the museum. And they started to reconstruct what was there. And they're doing it in a specific tool that is based on Wikidata to help us update all the details about each item that they found. So this is a new way to do data archaeology to help recreate something that was lost for humanity. Yeah, you had a question?
Yeah, is this something that like the museum paired up with they did it on their own?
They did it on their own.
So
they actually now work with, in some cases, the Brazilian community works with the GLAM institutions, but not in this specific project. This was just a Wikipedian who's actually a professor at the University of Sao Paulo, and he's like me, an educator that engages with Wikipedia and its sister projects inside and experiment in how we can implement it in the academic curriculum. So he's been used to working with his students on specific things like that. So that was a project that he took, and they started to do it and then opened it up to the whole public to send them information and help. And then the whole Wikimedia movement came in to help engage and to help, skim through all the information that we got from the public, put it on Wikidata, et cetera, and do that work of recreating the museum. And so this is one example of, again, the power of Wikidata. I want to finish with one more important example to you people who are actually studying and you're at the university right now. And so this is a game changer. Again, I want to talk about WikiCite. Do we have a few more minutes? Yeah. Awesome. So WikiCite is a project inside Wikidata where we want to basically curate all of the articles that were written in the world by anyone. Okay. Again, very ambitious. And we have some cool tools built upon Wikidata to help us do it. So this touches on what you mentioned before. Do we need to learn Sparkle? Not necessarily. There are some tools that are kind of an app that are already built upon Wikidata, right? And behind the scenes, they have Sparkle, but you as a user don't have to see it and interact with it. So I want to show you Scholia, right? And Scholia is, wait. Yes, so I want to show you Scholia. I don't know why it jumps like that. There you go. So this is Scholia, and this is an item of Philip Byrne. You can see that he's a researcher from the US. This is the part on the top is taken from English Wikipedia. But as you scroll down, he's a researcher, so we might want to explore what he did in terms of research. So how many of you know Google Scholar? You know Google Scholar, right? Most of you should know Google Scholar, and if you don't, you should. It helps us to find out information about publications in the world, right? In the research area that we're researching. And so Scholia is doing so much more than that, than what's available on Google Scholar. So what you can see here is a list of publications. First of all, a list. And then you can see a chart. All of it is based on queries, and you can see that you can click on the query if you want and actually see how it's written. But it's showing you the results of the query, right, related to that person. You can see the number of publications per year. You can visually see the statistics of where that person published most. So here you can see that he published mostly in PLOS, and just a nice bubble chart that shows you that visually, again, based on a Wikidata query. You can see, oh, I love this one. This is, again, something that shows us his relationships with other researchers. So important, right? Who are his co-authors and how are they connected? And again, all of this is, so this moves, this is alive, right? This is, I can move stuff here and just explore the information that I see here. And again, I can scroll down to see the topics that he was working on and the people that he might be associated with, et cetera, et cetera. So not only a bubble chart of not only where he published, but what he published about, et cetera, et cetera. So again, information that might be quite boring, but Scholia is helping us explore that researcher and his work in a much more engaging way than we were ever allowed to do before. And going back and wrapping up our discussion, I would say that I want to, again, stress the beauty of openness, and that is, we already see external parties not related to our movement starting to use Wikidata in interesting ways and creating all sorts of apps that use Wikidata. One of them is Historypedia. This is an external site that creates what I showed you before. We can do it through a query, right? Create a timeline, but this is already creating a timeline. All I did is type at the top, I think Italian painters is what I typed here. And I got a timeline, and then I could explore it and zoom in, etc., and interact with the timeline without needing to know any sparkle at all. There's Protus that does it for pictures and drawings, etc. And this is where we're going, right? This is, again, a demo done by a PhD student from Germany, and this student is focused, this PhD student is focused on natural language processing, right? So he's working on NLP, and what he did, he created a very simple platform. I talked to it in a natural language. I asked Platypus, who is Luke Skywalker's dad? And Platypus answered to me that it's Anakin Skywalker, and the result was based on Wikidata, basically. So this is where we're going. We would like to see more stuff like that happening. And it's only possible because every single datum in the system has either a Q number or a P number for the properties. Question?
I was gonna ask. Okay, yeah.
And also, Siri, Alexa, any AI today would use Wikidata because it's open, right? It's the biggest. So when you think of big data, usually companies curate information about you, and they have lots and lots and lots of data about us as users, but most of them would use it in a for-profit, right? To do something, to engage with us in a different way maybe than we might want. The difference with Wikidata is that it's open. It's by the public, for the public, and therefore it can be used by everyone, from students to researchers to companies to whatever. We use references just like in Wikipedia, so we try to notify where the answer or the datum came from, which is important for us. And yeah, so to sum up, there's lots of potential. The fact that we can suddenly do queries and visualize information, curate work that in the past was very difficult to curate, and actually seeing apps using Wikidata as a base to do cool stuff like timelines, et cetera, et cetera. There's also a lot of challenges when we suddenly have something like that. And I would say first is how do we make sure data is reliable, right? There's a question of reliability, just like in Wikipedia. And how do we verify the data that we encounter? How do we know if the data is complete? The way we model data might change the results that we get in queries, et cetera, et cetera. So all of this requires new skills, new critical thinking from users, which is why we thought it was important enough to bring to you. And first of all, that you know that it exists. Second, that you start interacting with it. And third, that you think about the implication of it and what it means. But basically, we kind of understand that we need to teach you data literacy these days, not only digital literacy, not only 21st century skills, sometimes it's called, not only academic skills, but also data literacy. So you are able to interact with data in an informed and smart way as digital citizens. And with that, I'll say that Wikidata is a tool. It could be used for good or for bad things like any other tool. And so it's on you, it's on us as educators, it's on you and as users to make sure that you interact with it in an informed way. And I would say that this is like one of the most exciting things that happened for humanity in the recent decades. It completely changes the way we interact with knowledge and with data. And so I'm hoping that you are as excited and that you will be proactive in exploring it and exploring its potential as hopefully future researchers, maybe people in the industry, wherever you go, this is relevant. It's not related to any specific discipline, but rather to all of them. And so I'm hoping that you can be, first of all, know that it exists and start interacting with it and know that you can explore. And maybe you wanted to say something more?
I want to say thank you first
Oh,
of all. She's a very, very busy person, as you have understood from all she told you she's responsible for. So giving her time twice to this class is very, very much appreciated. And I think, as I told you on Tuesday, just by teasing that I think the interesting issue here is how discourse becomes not only linguistic, but it becomes language with machines, translation to machines, and being able for us as individuals, being able to interact with the collective intelligence through these machines. So that would be the future of discourse, I think. And thank you. Good luck in your exams and papers. Have a great vacation.
One last note to the people who are interested in how Wikidata is now integrated into education. The third part that we didn't get to explore is just that, including a course that we're doing here at Tel Aviv University.
I will put the links of both presentations in the Moodle under their respective classes. Thank you.
By the way,